Hi guys, and welcome to Bankham Draws, and welcome to this new video called How to Draw Space and Sky Paintings. I'm super excited about this video because not only am I going to teach you how to draw space and sky paintings, I am also going to introduce to you my brand new brush set. Now, this set of brushes is something that I've been toying with for a long time. So every time I had to draw a cloud, I had to do the same thing over and over again. So I was like, okay, maybe if I just create some brushes that I can use for this purpose, I can always go back in and I can modify it in the particular painting that I'm drawing in, as long as I have a template for this. So this is why I created these brushes that you can see here. Now, it's not because you cannot create cloud-like drawings or sky paintings, space paintings with the brushes already in Procreate. Especially for drawing clouds, I would probably recommend that you go into drawing and maybe also airbrushing, work a bit with the soft brush that you can see right here. So there are brushes available in the original program, but I just found that they're not really particularly designed for drawing clouds. Except for this one brush, if you go into elemental brushes, at the bottom there is a brush called Clouds, and that is designed for creating clouds in Procreate, but it doesn't really have that stylized sense of design that I was looking for. So if we go into the brushes that I created here, and if we take this one, this is just the first cloud brush that I have in my set, and if we just draw that in real quickly, you can see it sort of has a more digital painting stylized feeling to it. It's not as realistic as a normal cloud would be, which I think is perfect, at least for my purpose of drawing. I like it when it looks a little bit fantasy-like. It doesn't have to look super realistic like a photograph. And now if we go back into the element brushes and we look at the cloud brush, we can see the difference. Now here you can see that it almost looks like I took a photograph of a cloud and I just painted it in. And if we zoom in right here, we can see that it's much more detailed than the brush that I have. And you know, sometimes it's good that it's that detailed, but it doesn't really fit into the style of drawing that I have in my drawings. It's like it's two different styles and there's no coherency in it, and it actually ruins the whole picture of the drawing. Now, if we just try and compare the two different clouds up against each other, you can really see what I mean by that. So all I'm trying to say with the brushes that I created for drawing skies, clouds, and space paintings, all the brushes that I'm going to introduce in this video, I'm not trying to take away from the original brushes in Procreate, that it's impossible to do. My point is just that for creating these paintings myself, I had to go in and create something that fitted my style way better and something that was tailor-made for drawing these particular paintings. So if you're here and you're not interested in purchasing my brushes, which is available on my Etsy store for a fair price, if you're not interested in that, you should just be aware that this is not a tutorial for how to create these kind of paintings with Procreate's original brushes. It's how to create it with my own brushes. I would still recommend you guys that you hang around and you watch this video, because even though you may not use my brushes, there are still a lot of tips and good advice to be had in terms of how to compose a picture like this. You know, composition, color choices, and everything like that. So I hope you stay tuned and watch this video tutorial, even if you're not interested in the brushes. Now, just before I get going with the actual tutorial itself, I just want to present some of the paintings that I was able to do using some of these techniques and some of these brushes. And this painting right here is sort of like a nebular fog, where you can see a pirate ship emerging out of the fog with these spectral humpback whales gliding alongside it. And as you can see on the work in this painting, it looks very sophisticated, but actually there is not that much to it. It's a bunch of different brushes that was used, but it's not as many as one should think. There's some fog brushes going on here, and of course I had to do a little bit of drawing design with the pirate ship itself and the whales, but actually it was fairly easy to create even though it looks very detailed. Now, if we go back out into my menu here, we can see some of the other paintings that I did. Now, this one is based on a photograph I saw, and I took a lot of liberties in this photo to create my own kind of style. But in this picture, I actually used my brushes, especially the cloud brushes, and then I modified it in the picture and was very focused on getting the right feeling of having a semi-sunset and with these really dark clouds giving off a contrast to the very sort of peachy yellow bright sunset we have in the background. In this painting, I've also done a little bit of landscaping, but it's not the important part of this picture. The important part is definitely what goes on in the horizon in the sky and with the two flying ships in the background, which apparently I have a thing for these days. And for another painting I did, this one was again inspired by one of my Insta friends who takes a lot of beautiful photographies, and he took this picture of a beach in Indonesia, and once again I did my own thing. I put in some birds and a little person in the foreground and some flying birds as well, and I made the colors stand out even more, because that is what you can do when you're drawing pictures. You can emphasize what you really like about it, and here it was definitely the complementary colors of the orange and the blue that I wanted to stand out. So now, if we start off with making, I think we're gonna start up with a sky painting, and then I'm gonna leave up the space part for the part 2 of this video. So let's draw on this angle right here. Now the first thing that I am going to do is I'm going to go in and pick my sketch brush that normally I use for drawing the cloud itself, but I'm gonna use it as a sketch brush here, which it works perfectly for as well. And then I'm just gonna plot in how I want my sky painting to look like. And I know for you guys it probably won't look like much. Sometimes I can be very vague when I'm sketching, but it will all make sense in the end. When I draw sky paintings, I like to put in a little bit of fun for the eye, which basically means that I draw in a kind of creature or an object that is in some way interacting with the background. I think it tends to look a little bit boring if you only have a landscape or a sky painting or a space painting. I like it when something goes on. I'm not saying that you shouldn't just focus on practicing sky paintings and space paintings and just go with that. I think it adds a little bit, and I think I'm gonna, like, this is turning out to be kind of an air balloon. I'm going to try and give it like a different kind of design so it can look a little bit original. Maybe I'm gonna put something no, that doesn't really work. Okay, but I think this is okay for a sketch. I'm gonna turn down the opacity a little bit so I can draw on top of it. And then I'm gonna make a new layer, put it underneath my sketch layer so I don't smudge it out when I draw. I want to be able to see my sketch underneath all of the coloring that I'm going to do. And the first thing that I do when drawing a sky painting is I try to figure out what color the background should be. And I'm going to go with a simple blue for this one. It's always important for me to initially have some sort of understanding of the perspectives and layering in my drawing on this level. So always start out with what is the furthest away, and that is usually just the color of the atmosphere or like the sky itself. Now I still want to draw in a little bit of nuances in this blue sky. It's not supposed to just be one dense color. And I'm going to use my Nebula Fog brush for this. It functions just like an airbrush. And it's actually almost the same as the soft brush from the original brush library. So if you don't have these brushes, you can go in and use that one. It has the same abilities and dynamics. Almost. I'm gonna pick a lighter blue, and in the bottom here, I want it to be a little bit brighter. We should imagine that we're that far up in the sky that the sun is actually below the air balloon. I'm gonna add a more saturated light blue just above the middle of the picture, and then more white at the bottom here. You can see already now we created some sort of dynamic in our background. And it didn't take a lot. Now it gets interesting, because now we want to work with the foreground, and now we're going to use one of the brushes that I made for this. And it's not just a matter of picking a brush and then, stamping it on. We're going to do something with it. First, I'm going to figure out the color, and I'm already in my head thinking of the Hercules movie by Disney. You remember when you're at the top of Mount Olympus with all the gods and everything? Everything is yellow and peachy and pink in the clouds. I want to have the same color scale as that. So I'm just gonna quickly plot in some cloud stamps here with the template cloud. And remember to mix up the colors. So for example, we're gonna have a purple color cloud down here. You can see how it looks. We want to use the awesome smush now. And what we're gonna do with that is we're gonna go in and we're gonna modify the cloud stamps. If you don't have this brush set that I have here, you can go into paintings, and probably the one that comes closest would be wet acrylic, I think, or maybe the round brush, the Spectra. But I do think it's going to be difficult for you to find a brush in the original set that matches this one, because I created this specifically because I couldn't find anything that resembled it. But what you do with it is you go in and then you start to modify the cloud. And listen, I'm not saying that you cannot stick with the original stamp cloud in this cloud brush. I just think that it's more fun to go in and modify it a little bit so it doesn't look the same for every single painting that you do. And what is awesome about this awesome smush, it has that name for a reason, is that its abilities and the way that I programmed it, it makes it kind of look like, when you draw out the color, it kind of looks like a foggy cloud. Okay, we're just gonna leave it there, make a new layer, and we're gonna go in and what kind of cloud brush we want now. Now this is called a fog brush, and that is because it's still a cloud, but it looks a little bit more foggy. And I want to have a sort of yellow background light that comes up behind the clouds. You remember what I said, that we should almost imagine that the sun is actually below the balloon and the clouds? That is the shine that you see right here. And you can see in the texture here of the brush that it kind of looks a bit like a foggy cloud where light is shone from below and then hits the bottom of it. Okay, now we're gonna create a new layer. You can see how I keep everything separate at this point in the layers. And we're gonna pick medium cloud, maybe medium cloud 1. You can see how that looks. It's a little bit less dense than the first cloud brush that I used, which means that it's better for something that is a bit further away. I'm gonna stick with this color that we got going right here. And we're gonna try and create some clouds that are a little bit further away, sort of like behind the balloon and at the top of the picture. So we're going to use these two clouds, the one at the top of the picture and the one below, to sort of create like a frame. And now don't be afraid of playing around with the intense colors. It might look a little bit silly at the beginning, but it gives us something to work with. And the yellow we got here could kind of look like, again, the sun from below hits something in the sky and it reflects. And then back again using the Awesome Smush to create a different look to it. And again, don't be afraid of becoming a little bit abstract with this brush. I promise you, you almost can't do anything wrong with it. And just draw everything out a little bit. Now, I've drawn a lot of clouds, so I kind of have this in my memory bank by now. But if you're doubtful whether or not it should look like, I would highly recommend that you have a picture of a cloud or a sky for reference, and then you can sort of go with that. And sometimes the wind catches on to the clouds and sort of drags them out. That's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to drag out the tips to make it show, or make it seem like the wind has caught on to the tip of the cloud and drags it out further into the horizon. Okay, we want to make a new layer and drag it all the way to the bottom, and that is because we're going to create some clouds that are further behind those two clusters of clouds that we're working with here. So we can sort of say that we have four main layers in this. We have the atmosphere, blue background, then we have the layer in the foreground, which is the big clouds that you see in the bottom. Then we have the clouds in the top layer, that is the middle ground, and then we have these foggy clouds in the background going out towards the atmosphere. Now what I'm doing here is I first made some foggy clouds, and then I picked a more dense stamp of a cloud, put it in, and now I'm smudging it out. If I remove the sketch, you can see it. Already now it's starting to look like something. And I would actually say that everything you do from this stage is rendering in details, because we have technically already created a sky picture. Now these pencils right here is something I designed for drawing clouds from scratch. And what you can do with them is you can go in and you can add extra details to the already existing clouds. So you don't have to draw from scratch, you can just put extra on it. And that is also what I mean by rendering. You go in and you render the picture, you add more and more detail. So the technique for doing this is that you press very lightly and then you start to sketch in where you think the sun might hit the cloud. It seems counterintuitive because clouds are just fluff, but they will actually reflect sunlight. They will have highlights and shadows, just as any kind of object will. Now, this looks very vague, and that is on purpose because what I'm doing now is I am smudging the colors in. This is such an important technique for me when I'm drawing clouds, the smudge tool. It's always a process of drawing in texture and then smudging it out. And remember to change the size of the brush as you go along to create a better dynamic. And you can see it's not everywhere that I smudge everything out. Sometimes I leave a bit more detail. And it's that contrast between something that looks airbrushed and has a very soft, smooth transition and then hitting an edge. You can see it like if I do like this. I have like the contrast edge from above, and then from below I smudge it out and make it look a little bit airbrushed and soft. So try to keep that in mind when you're drawing, that you want to have some sort of contrast. You cannot just have a whole smudge of airbrushed cloud. You need to have something that it leans up against. Now, I kept saying that we should imagine that the light comes from below, but that does not mean that we still cannot have a light source that hits the top of the clouds, because light will get reflected, maybe from the clouds in the back, they will get reflected back. So what is important here is just that you have sort of the feeling that a light is shining from below, it reflects something, and then it's cast back into the clouds. Now I just took one of my fog brushes and now I'm creating a little bit of atmosphere, some foggy clouds. Don't be afraid of mixing the clouds up. Now I'm just gonna quickly render some of these clouds that are way in the horizon here. And you can see how the brush I'm using right now is just perfect for creating this cloud look. Now the way that I hold my pen right now is I hold it very lightly. You can see the opacity is turned down a little bit. It's not that we want a very hard edge brush right now. We just want to keep it light. And again, every time I've done this, I smudge. Now I think you guys kind of get the technique. So I think I'm gonna turn up the speed on this video and just let you enjoy the rest of the painting. Now just quickly, what I'm doing right here is that I made a layer on top of all the other layers, put it on overlay mode. I picked a yellow, very bright color, put it on airbrush, and then I went in and I just saturated the colors with this technique. I can also turn it down a little bit, put a bit more color in it. That was a bit too much. And then go in and emphasize the purple and red colors in the picture. Okay, when you reach a point in the picture where you're thinking, okay, I'm done, you can merge all the layers, and then you can go into adjustments and go into curves. Keep it on gamma for this one. And then you can go in and you can sort of play around with the contrasts and the saturation. And I almost always finish a picture with this because I have a tendency to draw a little too bright sometimes. So for me, it's always a good idea to go in and give it some contrast. You can also go into color balance and turn up the saturation yourself like that. Work a little bit with the brightness. You can even go in and see what kind of hue you want and work with all sorts of crazy colors. I think I'm just gonna turn up off the saturation a little bit for this one. If you go into, oh sorry, we were of course in hue, saturation and brightness before, and now we're in color balance. Now here you can put it on shadows, midtones or highlights, and depending on what you put it on, you work with the different levels of color in the drawing. And here you can sort of, like, I think the background here, which is, we're in the shadow colors now, so it takes a hold of the darkest colors. And I think a lighter blue for the background worked pretty well. Here you can work with the midtones. You can see we get a hold of the middle of the picture right here. Made it a little bit more blue, and then the highlights, which is almost all the nuances in the picture, because a lot of the colors in this picture are very bright. So that makes sense that the highlights is the main focus of this picture. But that's pretty much it for the sky painting. You could of course go in and do a lot more with this painting. You could render it more in terms of how the clouds look. Those two air balloons, I'm not completely satisfied with them, but you know, they give a certain dynamic to the picture, which is what I wanted. So that was it on the sky painting. I hope you learned a lot from the methods that I have in this painting, and I hope that you were able to follow along with the kind of brushes that I used and whatnot. I think I'm gonna turn this video into one part and a two-part, so the space painting will be on part 2 of this video, so stay tuned for that one. And if you only want to watch the sky painting here, I just want to quickly let you guys know that the brush set is on my Etsy store, as I said in the beginning, and there's a link in the description that can direct you towards that. And other than that, I'm just so thankful that you're supporting my channel. If you like this, give it a like, and if you're new to this and you like what you see, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more. So thank you so much for watching, guys. Bye!